A complete stranger at a gas station told me not to drive home, and when I ignored his warning, my brakes failed at 65 miles per hour on a mountain road. By the time I understood why he'd tried to stop me, I was fighting for my life and realized someone I loved had been planning my death for months. My name is Jenna Bradford, and the person who tried to kill me was my own brother. 3 months before that terrifying night, I moved back to Asheville, North Carolina, after my father died, suddenly from a heart attack. He was only 62, and losing him felt like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. Dad had been my anchor, my best friend, the person I called when anything went wrong in my life. I'm 29, an elementary school teacher, and coming home to deal with his death was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Dad left me his house, this beautiful cabin-style place tucked into the mountains that he'd spent 20 years fixing up and making perfect. He also left me his life insurance and most of his savings. It wasn't a fortune, maybe $200,000 total, but it was enough to change my life, enough to pay off my student loans, to feel financially secure for the first time since college. I never asked for it. I never expected it. But Dad had made his choice, and his will was clear about what he wanted. My older brother Troy took the news hard. He's 35, been divorced twice, and has spent most of his adult life jumping between jobs and business ideas that never work out. Troy had always assumed he'd inherit everything because he was the oldest, because he was the son. When Dad's lawyer read the will and Troy found out he was only getting $20,000 and some personal items, his whole face changed. He looked at me like I'd stolen something that belonged to him. "This doesn't make sense," he said, his voice tight with anger. "Why would Dad do this? I'm his son. I'm the oldest." Our Aunt Beverly, Dad's sister, tried to calm him down. "Your father had his reasons, Troy. Jenna took care of him for 2 years while you were living in Nevada. He made the choice he thought was right." Troy didn't speak to me for 2 weeks after that. He wouldn't answer my calls, wouldn't respond to my texts. I thought I'd lost my father and my brother in the same month. But then he called me out of nowhere, said he'd been thinking things over and realized he was being unfair. He said he wanted to help me settle into the house, help me take care of the property since he'd grown up there and knew how everything worked. I was so relieved. I didn't want money to destroy what was left of our family. Over the next couple months, Troy came by regularly. He'd fix things around the house, help me sort through Dad's belongings, even offered to handle maintenance on my car since I was always so busy with work. He seemed like the big brother I remembered from childhood, protective and helpful. I thought we were healing together, that we'd gotten past the will and the money and all of it. My car had been making this weird squeaking sound when I braked, and the pedal felt a little soft, kind of spongy. I mentioned it to Troy one afternoon while he was replacing a broken fence post in the backyard. He wiped his hands on his jeans and said, "I'll take it to my buddy's shop, get it checked out. Family discount, don't worry about it." I handed him my keys without a second thought. Why wouldn't I? He was my brother. He'd never given me a reason not to trust him. A week later, he brought my car back and told me everything checked out fine, that it was probably just normal wear and nothing to worry about. I believed him because I had no reason not to. That Wednesday evening changed everything. I was driving home from a teacher conference in downtown Asheville around 9 p.m., tired and thinking about the stack of papers I still needed to grade. I pulled into a gas station to fill up, one of those bright, well-lit places that feels safe even late at night. I was standing there pumping gas, zoned out and exhausted, when a man in greasy coveralls walked over from the repair shop next door. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Your support keeps these stories coming. He looked worried, kept glancing at my car like something was seriously wrong. "Ma'am," he said, his voice urgent and low, "I don't mean to scare you, but please don't drive that car home tonight." I stepped back from him automatically, my hand gripping the gas pump tighter. Every warning I'd ever heard about women alone at gas stations flashed through my mind. "Excuse me?" I said, trying to sound confident, even though my heart had started beating faster. "I don't know you." The man held up both hands, showing me his palms like he was trying to prove he wasn't a threat. "I know how this sounds. Believe me, my name is Marcus. I work at the shop right next door. I saw your car pull in and I noticed something that's really bothering me. Your brake lines have been tampered with. I can see fluid leaking from here. I looked down at the ground under my car and didn't see anything obvious. No puddles, no drips, nothing that looked wrong. My brakes are fine, I said, still keeping my distance from him. My brother just had them checked at a shop last week. They said everything was good. Something shifted in Marcus's expression when I mentioned my brother. His eyes got more serious, more worried. Your brother took your car in for service? He asked carefully. I nodded, confused about why that mattered. Yes, to his friend's shop. He was doing me a favor. Marcus looked around the gas station, then stepped a little closer and lowered his voice even more. Ma'am, I've been working on cars for 32 years. What I'm seeing under your vehicle right now isn't normal wear and tear. Someone deliberately cut your brake lines. Not all the way through, but enough that they're going to fail under pressure. I'd say you've got maybe 15 to 20 miles before they give out. Completely, especially on these mountain roads with all the curves. My whole body went cold. That's crazy. Why would anyone do that to my car? Marcus shook his head slowly. I don't know your situation and I'm not trying to get in your business, but I know sabotage when I see it. I'm begging you, let me pull your car into the bay and put it up on the lift so I can show you what I'm talking about. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize and you can leave. But if I'm right, and you drive home tonight, those brakes are going to fail on one of these curves, and you'll go straight off the side of the mountain. I wanted to tell him he was insane and just drive away. Part of me was angry that he was scaring me like this, making accusations that didn't make any sense. But something in his face stopped me from dismissing him completely. He looked genuinely terrified, not for himself, but for me, like he was watching someone walk toward danger and couldn't just stay quiet about it. This is ridiculous, I heard myself say, but my voice didn't sound as sure as I wanted it to. My brother would never hurt me. Maybe you're right, Marcus said gently. But somebody did something to your car, and if your brother was the last person who had access to it, you need to ask yourself some hard questions. That's when things started clicking together in my mind like puzzle pieces I hadn't wanted to see before. Troy's sudden change of heart after weeks of angry silence, the way he'd insisted on handling all my car maintenance himself instead of letting me take it to my regular mechanic, how he'd been asking detailed questions about Dad's life insurance policy and whether I'd updated my own beneficiaries, the fact that I'd made him my emergency contact and given him power of attorney after Dad died because he was my only close family. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and called Troy. He answered on the second ring, his voice relaxed and friendly like everything was perfectly normal. Hey Jen, what's up? Just hearing him sound so casual made my stomach turn. Where are you right now? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady and not give anything away. There was a tiny pause before he answered. Home, watching the basketball game. Why? Everything okay? Did your friend find anything wrong with my car when you took it in last week? Another pause, just a fraction of a second longer than it should have been. No, everything checked out perfectly fine. Why are you asking? Is something wrong with it? I gripped my phone tighter. The brakes feel weird, like they're not responding the way they should. I was watching Marcus's face while I talked, and he was listening carefully to my side of the conversation. That's strange, Troy said, and I couldn't tell if the concern in his voice was real or fake. Maybe you should bring it back to the shop tomorrow and have them look at it again. Where are you right now? The way he asked that last question made my skin crawl. It wasn't casual curiosity. It sounded like he needed to know exactly where I was, like he was tracking something. Just running some errands, I said quickly. I'll deal with it later. I hung up before he could ask anything else. Marcus was watching my face, and I could tell he'd heard enough of that phone conversation to understand something was very wrong. Let me look at your car, I said quietly, my voice barely steady. Please show me what you're talking about. We walked over to the repair bay together, and my legs felt weak like they might not hold me up. Marcus got into my car and carefully drove it onto the hydraulic lift. As the car rose into the air, he grabbed a work light and positioned himself underneath, pointing the beam up at the undercarriage. Come here, he said gently. I want you to see this yourself. I walked over and looked where he was pointing. Even though I don't know much about cars, I could see the problem immediately. There was a thin line of brake fluid dripping from a metal tube that looked like it had been partially cut, not completely severed, but weakened in a way that looked deliberate and precise. "That line right there," Marcus said, tracing it with his finger without touching it. "That's your rear brake line. Someone made a partial cut right at this joint. It's fresh too, probably within the last week. Under normal driving it would hold, but the moment you really need your brakes, the moment you're going down a mountain road and have to press hard, that line is going to split completely, and you'll have no braking power at all." I felt like I might throw up. My own brother had done this, had looked me in the eye, smiled at me, hugged me, all while knowing he'd sabotaged my car, had probably been waiting for the phone call telling him I'd died in a terrible accident on the mountain road leading to my house. "That's too precise to be accidental damage," Marcus continued. "Someone knew exactly where to cut to make it look like normal wear and tear after it failed. Most people wouldn't even notice until it was too late." I couldn't speak for a moment. My mind was racing through everything that had happened over the past 3 months. Troy's anger at the will reading, his sudden friendliness after weeks of silence, the way he'd volunteered to take care of my car maintenance, the questions about my insurance policies and beneficiaries. He'd been planning this the whole time, and I'd been so grateful for his help that I never saw it coming. "I need to call the police," I finally said. "This is attempted murder." Marcus nodded. "I already called 911 while you were on the phone with your brother. They should be here any minute. But ma'am, you need to think about this carefully. Don't go home tonight. If your brother figures out that you know what he did, if he realizes his plan failed, I don't know what he might try next." I pulled out my phone again, this time calling the one person I knew I could trust completely. Aunt Beverly answered on the first ring. "Jenna? Honey, is everything all right? You sound upset." "Aunt Bev, I need you to listen to me very carefully and don't react too much. Don't call Troy. Don't tell him you've talked to me. I'm at a gas station off Highway 74 and someone cut my brake lines. A mechanic here caught it before I drove home. Aunt Bev, I think it was Troy." I heard her sharp intake of breath, then a moment of silence while she processed what I'd just told her. When she spoke again, her voice had turned hard and protective, the same tone she used to use when Troy and I would fight as kids, and she had to step in. "Oh my God, Jenna, are you safe right now? Are you with someone?" "Yes, the mechanic who found it is here with me. He's already called the police, but I don't know what to do. I'm scared, Aunt Bev." My voice cracked and I felt tears starting to build behind my eyes. "Stay exactly where you are," she said firmly. "I'm getting Uncle Pete, and we're coming to get you right now. Don't go anywhere alone. Don't go home. We'll be there in 20 minutes. 2 sheriff's deputies arrived before my aunt and uncle did. Deputy Chen was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes who immediately made me feel like I was being taken seriously. Marcus showed her and her partner the brake line, explained exactly what had been done and why it was deliberate sabotage, not accidental damage. Deputy Chen took photographs and detailed notes, then turned to me with a serious expression. "Ms. Bradford, I need to ask you something important. Do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight? Somewhere your brother doesn't know about and can't find you?" I nodded, wrapping my arms around myself. "My aunt is coming to pick me up. She lives in Hendersonville." The deputy looked relieved. "Good. We're going to pay your brother a visit tonight and see what he has to say. In the meantime, I need you to think hard about something. Has your brother had access to anything else important? Your house keys, financial documents, personal information?" My stomach dropped as I realized the full extent of what Troy had access to. He has a spare key to my house. He helped me organize all of Dad's paperwork, so he knows where I keep everything important. My insurance documents, my bank statements, all of it. And I made him my power of attorney after Dad died because he's my only close family left. Deputy Chen exchanged a worried look with her partner, Deputy Martinez. "We need to move fast then. Officer Martinez is going to escort you to your aunt's house to make sure you get there safely. Tomorrow morning, first thing, you need to revoke that power of attorney and get a lawyer involved. Change every lock on your house, too." Aunt Beverly and Uncle Pete arrived 15 minutes later, and the moment my aunt saw me, she pulled me into the tightest hug I'd ever felt. Uncle Pete's jaw was clenched so hard I thought his teeth might crack. "That boy," Pete muttered, shaking his head. In disbelief, I knew he was bitter about the will, but trying to kill his own sister? His own blood? We followed Deputy Martinez's patrol car all the way to Aunt Beverly's house in Hendersonville. I spent that night on her couch, unable to sleep, jumping at every sound outside. Around midnight, my phone started buzzing with text messages from Troy. "Hey, you get home okay? Roads were pretty dark tonight." Then another one, 20 minutes later. "Want to grab breakfast tomorrow? Haven't seen you in a few days." The casual tone of those messages made me feel sick. He was checking to see if I was dead yet, probably wondering why he hadn't gotten a call about a fatal accident on the mountain road. The next morning, Deputy Chen called me with news that made everything real in a way I still wasn't ready for. "We arrested your brother at his apartment last night. When we searched the place, we found everything we needed for a solid case. He had receipts from an auto parts store for brake line cutting tools purchased 5 days ago. His computer showed internet search history about inheritance laws in North Carolina, how brake failure accidents are investigated, and whether life insurance pays out for accidental deaths. We also found a handwritten note in his desk drawer where he'd calculated exactly how much he'd inherit if you died. He'd even researched how long he should wait before selling your house to avoid raising suspicion." I sat down hard on Aunt Beverly's kitchen chair, my legs giving out. Deputy Chen continued, her voice gentle but firm. "He's being charged with attempted murder, criminal tampering, and fraud. With the evidence we collected, this case is extremely strong. The judge denied bail this morning. Your brother isn't going anywhere." I should have felt relief, but instead I just felt hollow and heartbroken. The brother who taught me to ride a bike, who scared off bullies when I was in middle school, who used to make me laugh until I couldn't breathe, that person was gone. Maybe he'd been gone for years, and I just hadn't wanted to see it. Maybe the jealousy and resentment had been eating away at him slowly until there was nothing left but greed. The trial happened 4 months later, and sitting in that courtroom was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I had to listen to prosecutors explain in detail how Troy had planned my death, how he'd researched for weeks to find a method that would look like an accident, how he'd volunteered to maintain my car specifically so he could sabotage it without anyone suspecting him. Marcus Webb testified as the prosecution's key witness, explaining to the jury exactly how the brake line had been cut and why it couldn't possibly be accidental damage. He showed photographs, demonstrated the precision required, and stated firmly that in 32 years of working on cars, he'd never seen brake line failure like that, unless it was intentional. Troy's defense lawyer tried to argue that maybe someone else had access to my car, that the evidence was circumstantial, but it fell apart quickly. The tools in Troy's apartment matched the cut marks perfectly. His internet history showed months of planning. And then prosecutors presented emails Troy had sent to himself, detailed notes outlining his plan, calculating insurance payouts and property values down to the dollar. His ex-wife Stephanie even testified that he'd made comments about how my accident would solve all his problems, and that he deserved what Dad had left me. She said she'd thought he was just venting, never imagining he'd actually try to kill me. The jury found him guilty on all counts after less than 3 hours of deliberation. The judge sentenced Troy to 20 years in prison without the possibility of parole for the first 10 years. As the bailiffs led him away in handcuffs, he looked at me directly for the first time since the trial had started. I don't know what I expected to see in his eyes. Maybe remorse, maybe shame, maybe some hint of the brother I used to know. But there was nothing there except cold resentment, like I'd somehow wronged him by surviving. Like this was all my fault for getting the inheritance he thought he deserved. Aunt Beverly squeezed my hand as we left the courthouse, tears streaming down her face. "Your father would be heartbroken to see what Troy became," she said quietly. "But he'd be so proud of you for being strong enough to get through this." 2 years have passed since that night at the gas station, and I'm still learning how to live with what happened. Troy is in prison, and I've had to accept that the brother I loved doesn't really exist anymore, or maybe never existed in the way I thought he did. I don't visit him. He's never written to me or asked to speak with me. According to Aunt Beverly, who still writes to him occasionally because she can't completely let go, he maintains that he was planning to fix the brake line before I drove home, that he never would have actually let me get hurt. He's rewritten the whole story in his head, turned himself into someone who just had dark thoughts, but wasn't really a murderer. It's easier for him to believe that than to face what he actually did. I still live in Dad's house, the cabin in the mountains that Troy wanted so badly, he was willing to kill for it. It took me almost a year before I felt truly safe there again. I changed every lock, installed a security system with cameras, and started parking my car in a locked garage instead of the driveway. For months, every sound at night would make me freeze, convinced that Troy had somehow escaped or that he'd told someone else how to find me. Therapy helped me work through the worst of the fear. Dr. Ramirez taught me that healing isn't a straight line, that some days I'd feel strong and confident, and other days the terror would come rushing back, and both reactions were completely normal after what I'd been through. My car runs perfectly now. Marcus repaired the brake lines himself and refused to let me pay him for the work. I had 2 other mechanics independently check everything before I felt comfortable driving again. And even now, I test my brakes obsessively every single time I get in the car. I press the pedal 3 or 4 times before I even leave a parking space, making sure there's proper resistance, making sure I'm safe. Some habits born from trauma just stick with you forever, and I've learned to accept that. Marcus and I stayed in touch after everything settled down. We meet for coffee every few months, and he still doesn't think of himself as a hero. To him, he was just a mechanic who noticed something wrong and decided to speak up. But he saved my life by trusting his gut and saying something even when it might have seemed crazy or intrusive. Last year, I nominated him for a community service award from the county, and he won. He was embarrassed by all the attention, but his wife told me it meant the world to him to be recognized for doing the right thing. The hardest part of all of this wasn't the trial or even the fear for my safety. It was accepting that someone I loved, someone who shared my childhood and my blood, had looked at me and seen nothing except an obstacle to money. Troy never apologized. He never showed any real remorse. He just stayed angry that his plan didn't work, angry that I was still alive and he was in prison. That kind of betrayal changes you in ways that are hard to explain to people who haven't experienced it. I've learned to trust my instincts again, but it took time. When something feels off now, I don't dismiss it or make excuses. When someone's behavior doesn't match their words, I pay attention. Troy taught me that family doesn't automatically mean safety, that sharing blood with someone doesn't guarantee their loyalty or love. If you're watching this and someone in your life is suddenly being overly helpful after a period of anger or resentment, especially when money or inheritance is involved, please trust your gut. Pay attention to small inconsistencies. Don't let yourself be isolated from other people who might see warning signs you're missing. And if a stranger ever approaches you with a warning that seems completely insane, at least hear them out. Marcus Webb had absolutely nothing to gain by stopping me that night. He risked me thinking he was threatening me, risked looking foolish, risked me just driving away and ignoring him completely. But he did it anyway because he believed a human life was worth more than his comfort or reputation. Before you go, hit that subscribe button if this story impacted you, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Sharing these stories helps more people than you know, and your support means everything to me. I still teach elementary school. I still live in these beautiful North Carolina mountains. I've even started dating again, though I'm definitely more careful now about who I let into my life and how much I trust them. Dad's house finally feels like mine instead of just the place where something terrible almost happened. Sometimes I drive past that gas station where Marcus stopped me, and I think about how incredibly thin the line is between life and death. One person's decision to speak up, one moment of listening instead of dismissing, and everything changes. I could have ignored Marcus that night. I could have thought he was crazy or dangerous and just driven home. I would have died on that mountain road at mile marker 15, and Troy would have inherited everything, and no one would have ever known it was murder. But I'm here, I'm alive, and I'll never take that for granted again.